So let's get back into Genesis and let's continue our studies. Last time we finished off with chapter 7. So today I'm going to start with chapter 8. And this is the story of Noah after the flood had come. The flood took place over a period of 40 days. And when we say a flood, it is not just the water. Basically, it is an overflowing of the earth by water. But this overflowing did not occur just through one phenomenon. It was three main things that happened. One was what's called the fountains of the deep, so that the water, the earth, as we are told, it rests in water and on the water. Okay, so land masses that we see on earth, what we call continents, islands, etc., they are essentially floating in water like, a rubber ducky would in a bathtub. That's what they are like. So there's water underneath, and they are also sitting in water. So this water that was underneath the earth, it started to push, to come spouting out, like it just gave, when he says the fountains of the deep, it at great pressure, this water burst out from below and it covered the earth. And the second was that the windows of heaven, the windows of heaven, because we are told that there is a firmament above us, which is a solid like glass type roof, and there are some mechanisms which can have openings in it, which are called windows of heaven. And those came, and that poured a lot of water down. So the water came up from below, and the water came from above. And the third was that it also rained, like we have rain with clouds. So it rained, the waters came from below, and the waters came from above. And that's how the whole earth became covered and overflown with water. Now, in Matthew 24, Jesus implied at the very least that the people that were on the surface, they were all washed away on the very first day that this flood came, because he said that when the day the flood came and took them all away. So that would seem to indicate that at least as far as the loss of life of those people, except for Noah and his family that were in the ark and the animals that were with him, every other creature that was on the surface, they essentially were destroyed on the very first day. And that would lead me to believe that the pressure with which these waters must have come out from beneath, and the volume of water they just must have bore down from above was of such great volume, and it came down with such force that nothing could survive in its path. Okay, that's essentially what the Bible would seem to indicate. All right, so then this continued for a period of 40 days. So 40 days and 40 nights we are told that the waters kept coming and coming and coming till all of the mountains and hills and everything, all of the land mass on the earth was covered and submerged in water. So now, after the 40 days, the rain stopped, the fountains of the deep were closed, and the windows of heaven were shut. Now we can also learn from this that, science would have us lyingly believe that nobody is in control of all the processes of nature. Okay, that rivers just flow by themselves, oceans, just have their waves or however their motions. They are just natural random phenomenon, or the movement of the stars, etc., the heavens, that nobody is in charge. But from this story of the flood, we can certainly learn that God has mechanisms in place which He controls, like in a building, like when you have these fire hydrants, for example, and there's a fire, the firemen, they come and they open they attach a hose and they open the hydrant, and the water comes out at great force, and it helps extinguish the fire. Okay, so God has all these mechanisms in place in this earth. It is like a building, very highly advanced technological place, mechanical, with the mechanics in it, and other processes, what we call HVAC, etc., where you have ventilation and air circulation systems and water circulation systems. All these God has designed and controls. And that is the reason why He alone was able to open the fountains of the deep. I believe he has given angels that he has put in charge of the administration of these mechanical processes, okay? Just like in a building, you have a maintenance department. Any high-rise building, or even like a smaller building, the smaller building may only have one person, but in a high-rise building, you have a whole maintenance department, or in a major hotel or something, where they do. And these are the people that are in charge of all of the mechanical processes that make that building function. How the water flows, how the air circulation is working, air conditioning, any number of processes that are in there. They're quite complex, that are, control that these buildings can function, the electricity, etc., it functions properly. And that is how God's creation is. God has these processes and mechanisms in place right from the very beginning, and He is in charge, and I believe he has put these angels, because we can read in the Bible about the angels of the waters and the angel that holds the winds back. So the angels, one of the roles that they play is that they are the maintenance department of God's creation. Okay, so nothing is random. Science, as usual, because they rule God out of the picture, they make themselves fools, as the Bible tells us, that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, and being fools, they come up with foolish explanations. And therefore, they have no answers. Whatever they tell you is happening, that, the hurricane just forms, or whatever, a tsunami just comes, or a flood just happens. Like Noah's flood just didn't happen. But that, on a micro level, that is true today too. Whenever, say, the Mississippi, a couple of years ago, when they had those big floods in Mississippi, Missouri rivers, etc., or worldwide, even in Australia and many other places in the world, it keeps going on all the time. Anyhow, those are not just, natural events. There are some processes that someone is controlling that makes those things happen. And again, in the story of Job, when the whirlwind came, like a tornado, what we call a tornado today, it came and destroyed Job's sons and his family's houses, and killed his children and their servants, etc. Again, those were not just random events that just happened without anybody causing them to happen. So the point here is that what we can learn from the story, the flood of Noah, is that there is always a power or powers that are in control of everything that happens in and upon our earth. Okay, so let's go back now. So that's what happened. So the flood came, it lasted, the waters came for 40 days and 40 nights, and then they were stopped. But by that time, the whole earth had been submerged, and the only living creatures, at least on the surface, were Noah and his family and all the animals that were with him in the ark. So now let's continue in chapter 8. The chapter 8:1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth. See? Again, processes. Not random. Not natural. And we have been so psychologically programmed right from birth, from the day we are born, from the images we see on TV or the words we hear on the radio or what we learn in school soon as we go up, that, it is all random, that you were just evolved, say the universe just came through the Big Bang, and these things are just happening. They're called natural disasters, okay? That as if there is nothing that is causing them to happen, they just happen themselves. But what does it tell us here in verse 1 of chapter 8? God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. So just as he had commanded the waters, the fountains of the deep to be opened, just as he has opened the windows of heaven and the rain to fall down, he reversed the process now, where he made this wind to come. And this is interesting, this role that wind plays in drying the earth, which is these are the powers and forces that, these are energies, let's say, that God has created that manage the functioning of God's creation, okay? So God made a wind to pass over the earth and the waters assuaged. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped. Again, see, somebody is in control. God is always in control of His creation. God never lost control of His creation or of His creatures. This again talks about that subject of predestination, that God has predetermined everything. He has written a script from which Jesus said not a jot or tittle will pass. Okay, not even like a micro dot can be changed in that script by any power. Therefore, God is always perfectly in control. That is why He is the Almighty, because all might and all power belong to Him. That is why He is called the omnipotent God. He has distributed His powers to some of His creatures, to all of His creatures in a smaller or greater degree. But that doesn't mean that they are all powerful or that they are in control. It is always God who is in control. So the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped. They were stopped. Even if there was an angel that was sent to, shut the windows, like, you can tell your son or daughter or whatever, go shut the windows, there's a storm coming, right? But it is still at the command of God that these things happen. Just like in the story of Job, when the devil wanted to do harm to Job and his family, it wasn't something that he was free to do of his own volition. He had, he had to get permission from God to be able to do that. So the fountains also, the deep, well, the point I'm trying to make is, understand the omnipotence of God and then begin to understand your role in it. We are important. We have all been given a purpose and a reason for our existence, but it is only when we understand that our existence flows from Him that we can even begin to understand the question, the understanding, any sort of understanding about our purpose and the purpose of our existence. So the fountains also deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. So all three things God did at that time, which is He reversed that. Okay, first He had let loose the fountains of the deep, so He stopped them. Then secondly, He had opened the windows of heaven, He closed them. Then thirdly, the rain had come down. Now the rain was restrained. So all those three things that happened to bring the flood, now those are being reversed. And the ark rested on and the waters returned from off the earth continually. Where did these waters go? See, they went. There's two things that, two ways it can be understood, that the waters, the earth is like a pool, okay? So in this pool, when the waters rose up from below and above and it submerged all the land, and then these waters would need to find a place. One thing I believe that happened is, as they went, the land, because it is like a beach ball, let's say, that's gone under the water, it began to rise again. But the mass of land that existed before the flood, that was far greater. Okay? So what happened after the flood is that as these waters, they began to go down, the land again began to rise. I do not believe all of the land that existed before the flood came to the surface, okay? That these waters, the volume of the waters that were on the earth after the flood was greater, because it was not just the waters that had come up from the fountains of the deep, it was the waters that had also come from above when the windows of heaven were opened. So the actual volume of water as compared to the mass of land was greater now. Therefore, that means that the water would need more room, and therefore there would be less room for the land. And that is the reason why I believe that the land masses after the flood of Noah on the earth were greatly reduced than they were before. So the ark rested, and the waters returned off the earth continually, and after the end of 150 days, which is 5 months, the waters were abated. So this was a gradual process. It doesn't suddenly, the waters like they had come up, the pressure with which they had come up, they didn't go back down with the same pressure. They kind of went down slower, like in a water drain, you know, when you can have a fountain and the water just explodes from that fountain. But then when it drains, it goes down slowly down the drain. That's how it happened, okay? So in 5 months, the water basically had found their level, okay? The waters had found their level. The land surface that was going to reappear had reappeared. So the waters were abated at the end of 150 days. And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat, which we are told is in Turkey. Mount Ararat is in Turkey in the modern day time. So that's essentially where this ark came to rest. And this geography, the mountains of Ararat, I guess this name is based upon the geography that was mapped after the flood. I don't think these mountains and these land masses were the same, because they were substantially different after the flood than they were before the flood. So any maps or any geography from before the flood would not match what would be found after the flood. Therefore, these names, Ararat and all these other names that we read here, they must have been given to these sites and these locations after the flood had come, okay? After the flood had finished. So the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. So the waters had abated, but the ark was still floating in the water after 5 months. So it took another 2 months and 17 days. Notice the significance of these numbers. 2 months is 60, 17 is, so that's 77 days later. Again, these numbers, you know, I do not get into numerology, and I don't, claim that I have an understanding of it, therefore I won't. But I'm sure these numbers have all numbers have significance, okay? They do. Because God's creation in the end is based upon some type of numbering, okay? The numbering system which we cannot just understand because our minds are not complex enough to, as His is. So, but you know, that is what happened, that the ark actually came to rest after, 150 days later, the waters had gone off, and then another 77 days passed, and then the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. Okay, so again, that would signify that these waters, they kept finding their place within the earth, because that's the only place that they could go to for a period of 10 months now, we are told. So a total of, although the dry land had appeared after the 5 months, still the water there was more land, it seems, that appeared over a period of 10 months or so. And I think that the geography from the flood till some point after the Tower of Babel, because this geography of the earth changed again during the times of Peleg. And at this point in time, I am not sure if after the flood of Noah, that information I do not have, if there was still, like just in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the heaven and the earth, and in Genesis chapter 1, I believe there was only one land mass and there was one body of water. And now it is quite likely that even after the flood of Noah, this was still true, that there was one body of water and there was one land mass. But at some point in time, this land mass itself was divided into different areas, what we call continents today. That may not have happened right after the flood. That may have happened later in the days of Peleg. We are told that the earth was divided. So you see, the earth has gone through some very, very catastrophic events, even in the past 6,000 or so years. And it has seen some violent forces enacted upon it, which of course has changed, like I said, the whole face of the earth. The geography has changed, but even like the land masses themselves being split up. So you can just understand that, what sort of power was exercised. Therefore, God's power, man, we read these days, excuse me, you can read a lot about weather modification and this and that, all those things that people pushed in, especially on YouTube. One purpose they serve is that they try and make the devil and man omnipotent, okay? That, hey, we got so much power, we can control the weather, we can, destroy the earth, and we can do this and we can do that. I think most of those have certain truth in them, but neither the devil nor man is as powerful as they have us believe, okay? Because it is God alone whose power it is that can do such events, such as the flood of Noah, that can bring about such catastrophes, such as the spreading up of the earth into different land masses. So keep that in mind next time you see some video on weather modification. I used to believe all that stuff. Now I'm very skeptical of all the information that comes my way on YouTube and on the internet. I start to analyze it, like, this, all my life I heard that, oh yeah, they have the press of a button, they can send off all these nuclear bombs and they can destroy the whole earth and all life will be extinguished. Now I found out, that, hey, all this is lies and a hoax. Nuclear weapons don't even exist. So you see, the world is a world of lies, because we are told it's led by the father of lies. He is the God of this world. We are told that the whole world lies in wickedness, and therefore we have to be very, very careful and skeptical of all this information. But we can see here that it is these powers in the Bible, they are attributed to God. That He sent the flood, He caused the waters to then abate, He caused it to dry and for the earth to become habitable again, just as He did in Genesis chapter 1. And He it is that, in the end time events, they are not going to be caused by man. Okay? Yeah, man will play some small role in it, but when the judgments of God will come, it'll be just like the judgment of Noah. It'll come from above. Okay. And it came to pass at the end, and the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. And in the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. Excuse me. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent forth a raven, which went to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her feet, and she returned unto him and to the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. And he put forth his hand and took her, and pulled her into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. And I'm sure there's some significance in this too, that it was an olive leaf. Like the tree that Jesus cursed was also an olive tree, okay? So that's something that, perhaps you should think about and see if you can find any significance in that. At the moment, I really have not thought too much about it, so I won't. It's just that I find that interesting that it was an olive leaf that this dove found. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month. So this whole event of the flood took like a whole year. It started in the 600th year of Noah's life, and it ended in the 601st year of his life. It came to pass the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dried. So it was finally, even the waters may have gone up. You can understand that, after such a great flood, it takes a while for all the land to become dry enough. Otherwise, there will be a lot of mud on it and other sediment, etc. That, it would not be dry enough for you to step on it or for it to be habitable yet. So that took a little while longer. And it came to pass in the 601st year, the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the earth, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, in the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dried. And God spoke unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife and thy sons wives with thee. I find it a little bit interesting about these Old Testament, these patriarchs and even the prophets, but particularly the patriarchs like Noah and Enoch and Abraham. When it says God spoke to them, I wonder how God spoke to them. Is it something that they saw like in the physical, or and just in their mind or whatever? But it is interesting, that God communicated with them very directly, and they knew that it was God who was talking to them. God, go forth of the earth, thou and thy wife and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. Now it would seem, that the nature of the animals themselves was changed after the flood. Okay? These animals, which are at enmity with each other in many ways, or not necessarily in enmity, but which eat and devour each other. I don't know if that was how things were before the flood. Okay, we know that man killed each other, but I'm not sure if animals were also like that, where a lion would go and chase after a deer and eat it or something like that, or if this is something that happened after the flood and why. But nonetheless, I believe the world is quite different. It's the whole nature of man and of beast and the face of the earth and its looks and its appearance and its, the rate at which everything decays in here now. It all changed after the flood. It was a very, very significant event. Okay, and Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creeps upon the earth, after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. So this ritual, which I spoke about last time a little bit, of making of offerings to God, this seems to go right back to the time almost of the Garden of Eden, because we are told, that even in the case of Cain and Abel, that they brought an offering unto the Lord, and what Abel had offered was of this flock and the fat of his sheep, etc., that he had raised because he was a husbandman. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord. So this, what I'm saying is that the service of God, okay, it is not something that was introduced only after the time of Moses, but in some way, shape, or form, it has continued since the very days, it seems, of the Garden of Eden, or shortly thereafter. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled the sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. And this is something I want to clarify here. A lot of people teach us that God cursed Adam. Even in the case of Adam, after he sinned in the Garden of Eden, God did not curse Adam. If God had cursed man, man would have been finished. Okay, God had cursed the ground for man's sake, so that it would then not produce abundantly, but it would also bring forth, thorns and thistles, so that even the production of food that would be necessary for man's sustenance of his body would become a laborious process. And that's why I said, by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat thy bread. So that's why God is saying here, because he had cursed this ground before, right? He said, the Lord smelled the sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. And this is exactly what we read in Genesis 6, which was the cause of the flood, that the imagination of man's heart was only evil continually. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. Okay? While the earth remaineth. Now this is an important promise here, by the way. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. Okay? Then the promise here is that just like in the time of Noah, he had left a remnant alive. This process will continue as long as this earth continues, okay? That even at the time of the second coming, there are going to be some that are going to be left alive, not everyone. This is why Jesus said that for the elect's sake, the days will be cut short, lest all flesh should be destroyed, okay? So he won't do that, because this is a promise that he made back in Genesis chapter 8, and God, we know, is true, and he will, of course, keep his word and his promise. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Now, regrettably, I live here in Canada, and our winter is going to be coming soon, and I wish, that God hadn't made this promise here, that winter will continue. But anyways, we look forward to the day when, we will have the warmth of the sun, as in S-O-N, that will keep us warm, both in our spirits, all in our, in our complete being, in our spirit, soul, and body. So let's go on to Genesis chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. See, when I teach about the gap theory, that between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2, there is a gap of time. Okay? And these are many, many clues in the Bible that confirm that is indeed the case. And we can look at this here. What is the exact terminology here? God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. Let's see if this exact statement was made in regard to somebody else. And we can again read in Genesis chapter 1 verse 28, when God first made the first man, Adam. He said, God blessed them, the man and the woman, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. Okay? What had happened after the flood of Noah? The earth had become a ruined wasteland, right? It needed to be replenished. It had been emptied out, which is what Genesis 1:2 means, that the earth was without form and void. Void, one of the meanings of void is empty. It had been emptied out. Okay, just like it was in the days of the flood of Noah. It was like the earth was a ruined wasteland in Noah's time, which is why God told them to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish, which means to refill the earth. It is the same blessing and command that was given to Adam. Be fruitful and multiply and replenish or refill the earth, because the earth in Adam's time, when he was made, before then, it also had been destroyed, it also had been ruined, it also had become an empty wasteland. Therefore, the gap of time that exists between Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1 and verse 2, it is not a theory, it is a fact. Okay? So God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. See, this again tells me that the nature of the beasts and the nature of the relationship between man and beast, etc., was changed. In the time of Adam, God brought Adam all the beasts. He just named them. There was no mention that that he had to be threatened by the lions or any other creeping things like an alligator or something was going to come and eat him. No, nothing like that. But here, this relationship seems to be changing, because he says, that the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. It doesn't seem to have existed before the flood. So again, this change that came upon the earth after the flood was not just in the physical, appearance or the geography of the earth. This is also something on the inside of what has happened to us, the people, and also to all the other creatures that exist on the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every fowl of the air, upon all that move upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea, and into your hand they are delivered. Okay? And in the case of Adam, this is, they are delivered into your hand, they shall be afraid, they shall have this fear and dread of you. This was not said to Adam. But flesh, everything, and then another thing here in verse 3, every moving thing that lives, that live shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. So this year again was changing. There's something changed. That God allowed man now to eat flesh, where at the first, in the case of Adam and Eve, he was told that they should just eat the fruit off the trees of the garden, or that was supposed to be their meat, or their food. Although I believe even before the flood that this process, this practice of eating flesh had already begun, but here now it is being sanctioned by God. For flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat, and surely your blood of your life will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, and at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. It's interesting how he says every man's brother will I require the life of man, because who was the first murderer? He was a man who murdered his brother. Who sheds man's blood? Whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. This is repeated twice, to multiply. Okay, multiply and multiply therein. And this is something we shall see, that after the flood, as we get into chapter 10 and 11, into the genealogies, that the population seems to have just exploded after the flood. It doesn't seem to have taken long at all for it to go into the hundreds and into the thousands, then into tens of thousands. The multiplication truly was at a very great exponential rate, it seems. And God said unto Noah and to his sons with him, spoke unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. So that's another promise that God gave at this time, that this earth is not going to be again ever destroyed by a worldwide flood. No. Although the earth is going to be destroyed, it's going to be by fire this time, which is also symbolic of significance, that the final judgment of the earth, which signifies of the flesh and of creatures of flesh, is going to be by fire, not by water. Water cleans, okay? Water makes clean. So this shows us that this flood and everything that happened, it is still, the God was still in the process of cleansing us, of making us clean and pure, and the final purification, it takes place by fire, okay? And the final judgment is not going to be by flood as a washing or regeneration. It is going to be something that was built for a purpose and a season. It is going to be completely destroyed, and those that will come out of that fire, that are going to be refined like silver and gold are refined, they are going to be the heirs of God's kingdom in the age which is to come. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall any flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, the bow shall be seen in the cloud, which is talking about the rainbow. And of course, the devil, he always likes to expropriate that which, or to take for himself that which God has appointed and made as a blessing and a symbol of himself. Now of course the rainbow is all over the LGBTQE whatever movement, and it's become their flag, and rainbow, it is just a mockery of God and of his promises and of his symbols and of all the covenant that he has made with the earth in this age after the time of Noah. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, This is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. Okay, These are 3 sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And again, like I said, it happened in a very, very rapid. See, population always multiplies. It is not an additional, it is not a process of addition where you have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. No, it's 1 times 2 times 4 times 8 times 16, so it grows exponentially, and that is the reason why that is how God has planned it. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brethren without. And Shem and Ham took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. So this is an incident that took place, which led Noah to curse Ham and Canaan, who was his grandson. Okay, this is why the Canaanites in the Bible have always been symbolic of a people that were under a curse. Okay, and this is why, like, even when God gave Israel the land, what He gave them was the land of Canaan, which was something that Canaan had appropriated after the flood. Okay, but this incident, it is taught in many, many different ways by different people, by different preachers. I've heard them say that, this Ham, he committed an act of sodomy with his father. But, when you read the Bible, the way it's written, that's what we need to go by, is what we read in the scriptures. Then I don't think that that is quite true. Because what we read here is, in Ham, the father of Canaan saw the nakedness of his father. See, something he saw with his eyes, and told his 2 brothers outside. So it is not telling us that he did anything with the father, okay? And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders. So they put it upon their shoulders, they went backward. And what happens? And went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. See, they again, basically, there's no incident that Ham and Shem and Japheth did not commit sodomy or something with their father. It doesn't say that. All it says is that they didn't see his nakedness like Ham has seen it. Okay. Now we know nakedness as is symbolized as shame. Okay. It is something we are supposed to keep ourselves covered and not expose. That which is supposed to be kept private for anyone to see. So I imagine that there is, in these days, perhaps we don't have the same sort of, associations with this as it was in that time. But it seems that it was something that was quite significant, that it led Noah, when he became aware of it, to actually curse Canaan because of this incident. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Okay? And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And this blessing that he gave to Japheth, it seems to be bigger than that of Shem, from whom we get the terms. You hear in the news, you hear a lot of Semitic, anti-Semitic. That refers back to Shem. It means somebody who's anti the descendants of Shem. That's literally what the meaning is. And anti-Semitic, as it applies to just the people of Israel or just Jewish people, it is a very, very misleading term, because Semitic people, Arabs, are also Semitic people, okay? So it would apply just equally to any of the Arabs as it does to the Jews. But you see, most people don't understand that, therefore they just go along with the propaganda that they hear in the news. But anyhow, what the point here is, as we shall see, the descendants of Shem and Japheth, that the Japhethites are what we would consider to be the European races. And they have been the most dominant races in the world almost since the time of the flood, okay? Or at least for a very long time now, since the time of the Greeks and the Romans. Whereas it used to be the Egyptians and the Babylonians and the Persians, but after that, for the past few thousand years or so, they have risen to ascendancy, and they have essentially gained control of the whole world, which, because here it says, and God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Okay, so not only was he going to be, the Canaan was going to be his servant, he was also going to dwell in the tents of Shem. So this again is something that we see fulfilled in this world, in this time. Therefore, again, a confirmation of that which we read in the Word of God. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. This is actually quite significant that he lived another 350 years after the flood, because as we shall see, the ages of the patriarchs after the flood, they decreased greatly. I mean, they were reduced in their lifespans very, very rapidly. Okay, their lifespans became shorter and shorter. And I'm sure Noah outlived a lot of the people that were born after the flood. And he'd already lived like over 600 years, before this time came, right? So his age was, he lived to see a lot after the flood, not just the flood, but he saw the world as it grew. He might even have been around at the time of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. So those are something which is the ages of these people and how they overlap is again studies that people have done. I myself am not, therefore I'm not really going to go down there. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So that brings us to the end of the story of Noah, who was a preacher of righteousness, that he is the one that God saved by grace so that he could be instrumental in replenishing and refilling and multiplying and repopulating the earth, just as Adam and Eve were chosen after, or created or formed after the judgment of the times of the angels and of Lucifer, which we have talked about, the gold and silver age, etc., in the earlier parts of this program and on many different videos on my channel. So this is Noah. He is a very important and significant figure in the Bible. The Bible also tells us that that the end times, the days, and these days are going to be like the flood of Noah, that the days of Noah. But the days of Noah is not about Nephilim giants and demons and hybrids running around. No, the days of Noah were days of evil and wickedness, that the man's imagination of man's heart was only evil continually, and that we see happening daily in our world. I just posted a couple of videos on this so-called transgenderism movement, which is again another sign of how rapidly our world is degenerating and how the imagination of the thoughts of man's heart is evil continually in the media. Wherever all you hear is evil continually, and that is a confirmation that we are very close to the days of Noah and the beginning of the times of the tribulation, just as it happened in the days of Noah. So I think I'm going to end this here with chapter 8 and 9. Then we shall continue with chapter 10 and 11 and talk about the Tower of Babel and what happened there, and how again it was very significant. So the world has seen a great deal of transition, okay? Transition from the time of Adam, first of all, from the Garden of Eden. It was a major transition when they had to leave the garden, okay? And then after the garden, they went through the time of the flood. So there was a world that was existed between the time of Adam leaving the garden and the time the flood of Noah came, which was substantially different from what we have today. And then after that, we had a period of time from after the flood when the replenishing of the earth and multiplication happened again, repopulation happened again, to the time of the Tower of Babel. And after the Tower of Babel, the world transitioned again. And each one of these has, in my belief, the world has degenerated, that it has gone down, it has regressed, it has gone backwards. We have not improved. We have not evolved as the devil would have us believe. If anything, the world has devolved, okay? It has began in a very high state, and that is the history of creation. It began in perfection, and since then it has been degenerating, decaying, and becoming corrupt until the perfection will come, okay? And that is exactly what we see in the garden, from the Garden of Eden to the time of the Tower of Babel, and after that it just, everything went downhill, let's say, not improved. All right, I think we are good here. Thank you again. I know God bless all of you who have joined me live. and again, those who will watch this later on and who will take the time to study the information. I hope that you see that this is the job that pastors and teachers are supposed to do. They are supposed to go through the Bible is our textbook, right? And if you take a course in physics or something, they give you a textbook and the professor or teacher goes through it chapter by chapter. And that's what we are doing here, is we are going through right now the book of Genesis. And that is what Bible study should be. It shouldn't be about one verse of scripture. It should be about the whole book. And God willing, we'll continue these studies till we have gone through the whole book. Thank you again. God bless you all. I'll be back next week, God willing, to continue with this study.
Don't you wonder why the stars are in the sky? They're telling you and I of the glory of God. And every towering tree is there for folks to see. So there no doubt can be of the glory of God.
So let the words of my mouth, meditations of my heart, do the same thing for thee, and the witness speak to the